Welcome back. It's Louisa Munson from Love and Astrology, and I'm on to, I think, day 6 now of my Venus challenge, where I said I would look at different aspects of Venus and love in our birth charts, and how we can navigate love and intimacy in our relationships, and where we might see that in our charts, how it's playing out. In today's episode, I'm looking at the 5th house and how we can interpret that. Many of the skills I'm going to be using in this show are just very, very similar to the way I've been looking in previous episodes. So, for instance, up until now, I've looked at the rulers of the 7th house, the rulers of the IC. I've been looking at where Venus is in the chart and what it's related to. Is she in hard aspects or easy aspects? So in today's episode, I'm going to be looking at the 5th house ruler, how it shows up, how it relates to Venus, just basically having a little explore. The first example I'm going to have a look at, let me just bring it up. I'm going to look at it in a couple of different ways, because one thing I've noticed in the comments is I've got a lot of people who are commenting that use a whole sign chart layout, which is very different to the layouts that I'm used to using. So, for instance, I tend to use something like Placidus or Co, or some people might say Cock. And so what I'm doing is having a look. This is essentially the same chart. And one of them is the whole sign, and this is this one. And this is the alternative. Now, what you'll see different, like, for instance, with Placidus and Co, for instance, or Cock, the ascendant is right at the start of the 1st house. And then the 4th house starts at the IC at the bottom. The descendant marks the 7th house. The MC marks the start of the 10th. They're like the cusps, the starting points. And all of these houses are a different size. And I'll talk about this in a different episode, as to my preferences or what works for me. Essentially, if you know how to read a chart, you can read any different layout. But it's a good skill to have, to play around the different layouts. So this one is a whole sign, and what you'll see here is the whole 1st house starts in the sign where the ascendant sits in. So here, the 1st house starts at the beginning of Gemini, because the ascendant is in the sign of Gemini. The MC is at the top. It's within the 10th house, but it's not on the cusp of the 10th house, and then so on and so forth. So let's have a look. One thing you'll notice, because I'm going to look at the 5th house of each, is that it's going to make a difference according to which layout you look, but only a subtle difference. So it's an interpretation difference. So, for instance, with the whole sign, you'll see that Libra is the ruler. And the whole of the energy of Libra is considered in the 5th house. Whereas this one, the cusp is in the sign of Libra, but some of the planets that fall in the 5th house also fall in the sign of Scorpio, and some of the other Libran ones don't. So let's explore this one from a couple of different perspectives, and maybe also have a look at another chart. So when we're looking, with the ascendant at the start, the 5th house ruler is like I said, it's in the sign of Libra, and the planet that rules Libra is Venus. And so, we'll say Venus, it rules the 5th house, but Venus is actually in the 4th house. So we would use that in the interpretation. So, for instance, this person, and I should say what the 5th house is. Sorry, I didn't. I should have started there. But the 5th house is that place that people talk about as a place of creation, and hobbies and the things we love to do. So, for instance, it involves, I always think of it as a womb. I always think of the 5th house as being that place where all of creativity comes from. And obviously in the female form, it's the womb. It's like the portal to everything. It's the portal to goodness. So it's like the place of conception. It's the place where we're conceiving babies, where we're conceiving ideas, where we're also conceiving the birth of a relationship. and romance is very much a new energy that comes into your life. So all new relationships, I think, have a lot to do with the fifth house, and sex or sensuality or lovemaking, however you want to term it, is really a fifth house occupation, because it's something we're birthing. It's an energetic that comes up and it sweeps us into a frenzy. So, you know, everything that we love doing really is encapsulated by the fifth house. And so the reason I'm really looking at it is obviously the fifth house has something to do with how we enjoy coming into a relationship, in particular at the start, very much about romance, and also about the possibility to have children, which for a lot of people is really important in terms of a longer term picture of their relationship. So yeah, that's why, you know, the fifth house is quite important. So in terms of this fifth house, what have we got going on here? So Venus is the ruler of it, and Venus will have something to do with how the fifth house energy is expressed. So here we've got Venus in the fourth house. The fourth house is about the home, and it's about stability, and it's a little bit private. So what I would say is this person, the owner of this chart, when they're in the early days of romance, actually they are quite interested in romancing at home and keeping quite close to home. To me, it feels like something that naturally comes, like, you know, if you're intimate with somebody, if you're sharing, if you're starting to open up to something, in particular, what you're passionate about and what you love, you'll be bringing them into that. You'll be bringing people into your home. You'll be bringing them into a place of intimacy, and it's slightly private. And it may well be very much influenced by the home you grew up in. Now, Venus is also exact in a conjunction with Pluto. It's very, you know, less than half a degree difference, but they're both at 6 degrees in the sign of Libra. So Venus and Pluto together is quite an intense way of loving. So this person absolutely, when she feels, I know it's a female chart, once she feels the start of love or intimacy, it's a very, very deep, very loyal, very intense feeling. And it can take her on a really big, intense journey. So I imagine for her, lovemaking is something very special, very private, very deep, that creates some form of deep change and transformation. So she really might like something that she feels really, really intensely, you know, as opposed to somebody who just kind of falls into bed and is a bit slapstick about their lovemaking. This is very different. You know, this person attends to lovemaking in quite a beautiful way, and it's very intense as a relationship develops. You know, early days in a relationship, she is really wanting to deeply understand the person that she's with. So yeah, and that level of intensity may sometimes stop the development of a relationship. You know, not all partners want to go so deep. And so her depth might actually be counterintuitive at times. However, for the right partner, I would imagine that when this woman does get into a relationship, I imagine it goes quite quickly. Now, one of the things with Pluto, and I've noticed with Uranus as well, is when things go too fast, they can start really intensely and then fizzle out really, really quickly, because it's too much for us to cope with. It's almost like taking heaven by storm. You know, it goes so deep, so quick, so it carries so much potential as a seed point. It's so much potential there that the actual human isn't absolutely able to live up to the potential of the relationship. So it may well kind of fizzle out because it doesn't quite have the legs to support itself. So that's something that I would recommend watching out for in terms of relationships. Now, Venus is also in a conjunction with the Sun. it's in the evenings, the morning sun position here in terms of what kind of Venus energy. And you can look at the earlier discussion I had in particular on the Venus retrograde about what the morning sun means. But, you know, she's got both her Venus and her sun in the sign of Libra, which is very romantic. So this person does love the idea of romance and creativity. She's a very, very creative person. And Venus, Venus in a conjunction with the sun, it's a good distance away. You know, she'll be able to express her creativity and her love, and also show her creativity as a person. You know, it's not subsumed. So I love this. So that is definitely something to focus on. She's also got Venus square the moon. Now, this is an interesting one. It's one of those slightly difficult aspects, but not something you can't overcome. It's very, very human. And I often notice it in people that get quite deep and get quite jealous or possessive. So there is a tendency to feel things so much that possessiveness comes in. And with the moon in the 1st degree or the 0 degree of the sign of Cancer, this is somebody, again, who really feels things. And so what you may well find is the intensity of her feelings sometimes not short circuits, but it's so much again that the human side of her almost can't cope with the level of the intensity of the emotions. And so again, I would say there's a lot of pressure for her in her 5th house, which is where relationships tend to start. Because there is such a depth and a need to go to kind of dive right in and explore it, that it could absolutely leave her feeling very vulnerable. Her 5th house, also coming up in her 5th house, is Mars, Uranus, and then Mercury in the vertex. So Mars is in a conjunction with the Sun. It's also in the sign of Libra. And Mars in the 5th house is, I have noticed, you know, that the people who have a 5th house Mars seem to be absolutely devoted to fun and their hobbies. You know, they're very, very good at getting things started and to keep going with it. They have lots of ideas and are quite physical as well. So 5th, like from a romance or lovemaking perspective, she needs a very strong physical lover, you know, somebody who is going to put her through her paces. We've also got Uranus here, which is really interesting. She also needs an exciting lover, you know, somebody who likes something slightly unusual, and can also take her to somewhere really, really new. So she's looking for a really deep relationship that could be so deep that it shocks her to her core. One that she, by default, just feels so vulnerable in, which may or may not make it last. You know, it may collapse under the intensity. Somebody with whom she can absolutely really feel that sense of lovemaking, very strong physical lovemaking, and also somebody who, it's interesting because Uranus in the 5th is also very stop-starty. So there'll be, you know, big moments where they're like falling into lovemaking and being as unusual as possible. And then there might be like a big stop, you know, where there's not so much happening. Uranus really changes the tempo. It doesn't really give you consistency. So I would imagine that until this person finds themselves, or if they choose to find themselves in a long-term relationship, I would think that it would take quite a while to get the tempo of how often you see each other, how deep your conversations are, and how intense the whole thing is. I think it would take a while to really get going. So I think it's a very, she's, you know, her 5th house is a very, very exciting place, looking at this. And also Mars and Uranus in opposition to Chiron are bringing up quite a lot of insecurity and old hurts, again, that may play into this. Now, you know, I could go much, much deeper, but, you know, I'm trying to keep this as sort of useful as possible to people. So Mercury here is in the sign of Scorpio with this house system. It's showing up in the 5th. And so here we also have the intense conversations, an intense way of thinking, a love of these conversations. So, with the 5th house Mercury, she is absolutely looking for somebody with whom she can share discussions and go very, very deeply with, and have almost a very strong friendship with as well. Mercury here, you're talking about love, you're talking about relationships, you're talking about what makes you tick, the insecurities, the psychology, everything, because Mercury in Scorpio loves nothing more than these deep dives into the psyche. And the vertex as well. The vertex is the point of what the universe is really calling out for you to do. And so with this 5th house here, which incorporates these Scorpio sides, it feels like life is always pulling her into these deep and psychological relationships that, it's important to navigate the space of the psyche together. I would imagine that it's that love of understanding the psyche that actually puts her as somebody who really loves astrology. And also Uranus really shows up. It's an astrologer's planet, as is Pallas Athena, by the way. But, having Uranus here is also describing her hobby, which is astrology, thinking very deeply about things and going into consciousness. So that's one interpretation, looking at that particular house system. Now, if we look at the same chart from the whole sign, you'll see it's very different. So one thing that I would say is different is, this Mercury and the vertex, to do with the way she likes to have conversations, shifts into her 6th house. And so her 6th house, the way she does life is quite deep, given Mercury here. It also shows that she's somebody who, so funny, when you get what people say, oh, I'm having a download, when you get a tone in your ear. I've got a very, very deep tone going on right now. The way she likes to think, and the vertex here, interpreted through the 6th house, is that the way she does life is just pretty psychological, and also that she is very, very busy in her mind, always, organizing this and organizing that, needing to work quite effectively. There's a lot of preoccupation there. But if I was to look at the 5th house alone from this perspective, with Venus and Pluto also in this 5th house, I would say her hobbies and the way she expresses her hobbies are so much more romantic and deep. It's almost like I must create or I will die. I must make love, or it's going to be a fate worse than death. So there's so much fatalism that comes in with this whole sign interpretation. There's I would say a slightly more romantic feel. It's less based around the home. There's less of a need to bring the relationship home and sort of ground it in her energy. And there's much more of a creative energy for her relationship. Let's have a look at another. Oh, hang on. Let me just whiz through these. So I mean, she's still got the same aspects, Venus is still square the moon, and the moon is showing up here in the 2nd house. So it does change things a little bit. Anyway, let's have a look at another chart now. And this is a random chart. I can't remember whose chart this is at all. And in fact, that's the way I'm going to run it in the future. It's actually much better not to know whose chart I'm talking about. So in terms of this 5th house, and I'm using my preferred house system, the house is ruled by Jupiter because it's the cusp is in the sign of Sagittarius. So Jupiter's a really important player in understanding this, and Jupiter is in the 3rd house. So this is somebody who does romance and early relationships from the perspective of the 3rd house and the Jupiter energy. Now, the 3rd house is about community, but it's about communication. It's very friendly, it's very brotherly, sisterly. And it really draws people into the community. So this is somebody who finds lovers really from friendships. This is somebody who's got a very friendly love focus. They've also, so you can also see that Jupiter is in a conjunction with Uranus, which makes things really quite exciting for this person. You know, this is somebody who is deeply creative and very expanded in the way they're thinking. They're seeing whole new systems and patterns of ways of doing things. Actually, I can remember whose chart this is now, and this is somebody who's very inventive. They've got almost like a sort of genius way of thinking about it. And so there is a level of genius that comes into their relationships. You know, it's almost like they're co-creating with their partner, you know, like they go into business with their partner. And it starts from this place of friendliness. It starts from a place of shared interests. It starts from a place of community, what is going on in the community. Now, Jupiter and Uranus are also in an opposition to Chiron. Well, that's a little bit difficult to unravel. And you know, the Chiron is in the 9th house. So this person is kind of very much focused on the community side of things, and the relationship expresses itself. It's almost as if it has a purpose. You know, young relationships and the way they're expressed, it's almost like they're doing something for the community. They're teaching the community. There's that sense of joy in creating. And one of the things I think that creates a bit of pain there is the fact that, you know, they can't go too deep. And, you know, by the way that they start their relationships, it's very much centered around what is local, you know, like their terms of reference, their how they're exploring things is very much local and not so much further away, almost as if things outside of their community are causing them irritation or insecurity. Venus is in the 7th. So, you know, in terms of a love chart, you know, this person also has Venus right on the descendant, which is a really good sign of somebody who finds themselves in relationships and is very loving, is very sort of desirable of finding relationships. And you'll see as well that Venus is in a lovely trine with Jupiter, the ruling planet of the 5th house, and also in a trine with Uranus. This is somebody who falls into relationships very easily, and it starts very naturally and it very much in a friendly way, very much from a sense of doing together and being together. So that's really good. Venus is also sextile Chiron. So it's also there. It's almost like falling into these relationships this person has. It's quite a healing event, you know. So there is something that really helps them to heal together. It's like they're together against the world, if that makes sense. Venus is also trine Pluto. Where's that? Oh yeah. Trine Pluto, trine Jupiter, trine Uranus. These are very, very strong and helpful aspects in terms of setting up a relationship. And the fact that the ruler of the 5th, you know, is in this sort of helpful connection with Venus is really beneficial. And of course, Uranus here is the ruler of the 7th house. So having the 5th and the 7th house rulers together, the 7th house is all about partnership, if you didn't already know. So, you know, like the 5th house is all about the romance. The 7th house is all about the continuing relationship as it settles and how partners show up. Last thing then, in the 5th house, to interpret the 5th house, this person has got Juno, which is the goddess of marriage, and also very much about commitment, what we dedicate ourselves, what we commit ourselves to. Juno also has a very sexual side. So this is somebody who really does love a lot of sexual intimacy. The vertex is there. Funnily enough, it was in the last chart that I was looking at. So there is this sense that life is really wanting this person to connect with other people in a romantic way and to create in, you know, through the romance together. The sun is also there, very much like the previous chart. Ceres, about having children, is also there, and Mercury. Ceres and Mercury are also there. Now, I do know that this person is somebody who started family businesses. They've had a couple of families. And each time the whole family gets involved. So I think that's probably where the Ceres and Mercury are coming together. Mercury often shows young people in our world. So yeah, this is a highly creative, highly inventive person who has a very, once they're in the relationship, it connects into the longer term relationship, and everything is coming from that connection. So you can see here why the 5th is so important as a place where we're birthing ideas and conceiving ideas. Last of all, then, let's have one more look at Jupiter in the 5th. The 5th house. Now, again, this one is ruled by Jupiter because the 5th house cusp is in the sign of Sagittarius. Jupiter is showing up in the 9th. So this is somebody who I think probably loves women who are slightly different to the women they grew up with, women who maybe come from other countries, other cultures. There's definitely this sense of travel and expansion through romance, early romance. In fact, I do know whose chart this is. And that is actually so. Interestingly as well, Jupiter is in a conjunction with Venus. So again, the ruler of their 5th house. And this is somebody who falls very much into the easy, early start programming. Like this is somebody who falls straight into the early romance, and it goes very, very quickly. It moves quickly. So they've got a conjunction with Venus and Chiron in the 9th house. So this is somebody who falls into these very sort of karmic healing relationships with women from other parts of the world, other cultures, people that represent something very, very different. This is somebody who's married a few times, and 2 of them have been from different cultures. So that is how it has been expressed in their chart. Jupiter in their conjunction with Chiron is very much about almost needing these connections to heal. An interesting little side point here with Jupiter ruling the 5th house cusp, especially in the sign of Sagittarius or Pisces as well, which is Jupiter and Neptune ruling. Both Jupiter and Neptune tend to love having children. And Jupiter expands things. So having Jupiter at the side of the 5th house, this is somebody who romances a lot. But given that the 5th house is also about children, this is somebody who's had a lot of children, whether their own or stepchildren, like looking after other people's children. It's come up a lot as a continuous theme. Jupiter is in opposition to Uranus. And Uranus is also in an opposition to Venus and Chiron. This is a really, really big thing that plays out in his life. So I don't know where this person is in terms of their story right now, but there is this interesting angle where things also dissolve, because Uranus does show where things end. And sometimes when there's a bit of a bumpy ride, when the balance isn't quite right. So I do see with some of these slightly more adventurous 5th houses, romance and finding the right relationship can take a while. I've no doubt that this person is deeply romantic and idealistic in terms of their relationship. Uranus and Jupiter are highly idealistic. And so any kind of connection between the two shows high levels of idealism. And sometimes I think, this kind of energy. I know a couple of other people who've got Jupiter and Uranus in opposition, of different age groups as well. And one thing that they consistently hold in their energetics is this over optimism that situations, really unusual situations, are going to play out very well. And they may well for a while, but with unusual situations playing out, you need to change your consciousness to support that. And Uranus is very much about consciousness, universal consciousness. And so, this is somebody who absolutely loves, is very genuine, is very vulnerable, gets right into a relationship, dives right in with people who are very different, and from a different culture and sometimes language as well. And they don't necessarily have the right consciousness or support underneath. So it's worth watching out with that opposition, that idealism doesn't come too much. It's almost like, again, I used this term earlier in this recording. It's a bit like taking heaven by storm. You know, it feels so good. Let's enjoy this. And then it's like, oh, wow, how did that all fall apart? And it's because it developed so fast that it didn't really settle. So it's a really, really big theme. Finally, this person has also got Venus Chiron square Mars and Saturn. And Mars and Saturn are right on the ascendant. Now that's pretty tough. Mars and Saturn conjunctions also make this person quite, they have an appreciation for discipline and a sort of military kind of background, a military interest, you know, where doing and rules really combine. And so it's a very interesting little combination. You know, they put themselves through rigorous amounts of discipline, especially with it right on the ascendant. And yet there is this difficulty because the women in his life, as revealed by Venus here, especially in their conjunction with Jupiter, they're not very disciplined. And so there is that sort of juxtaposition for this person between how he sees himself, which is achieving, and somebody who is rising up, and he's finding himself in relationships with women who aren't very disciplined and a little bit soft with themselves. You know, they're kind, they're loving, and it's a really good counterbalance, but it's very difficult to integrate in terms of the relationship. And like I said earlier, you know, with this pattern, it can take a few goes of a deep and loving relationship to get it right. And that's what I love about humans so much, you know, that we keep on going until we do get it right. So this person, last of all, then they've got a 5th house Neptune in opposition with the moon. Oh, that's also quite a difficult aspect. Again, it's very idealistic, and it's also very easily despondent. I myself have actually got Neptune in a square to the moon, and with the Neptune squares and oppositions to the moon, we can feel very romantic, we can feel very spiritual, very elevated in our feelings. You know, our feelings lead us to these sort of beautiful moments of joy and imagination, and like really high levels of empathy and generosity and kind of world love, or, you know, like a love for everyone. And then we come like right flat back on our faces. It's like we walk into a brick wall and it's like, whoa, that hurt. Because, you know, it's very much a dreamer's aspect. It's an aspect that we deceive ourselves. You know, we put other people on a pedestal. And so with this aspect of the moon in opposition to Neptune, this person is deceiving themselves. You know, they see the potential of the relationship, but not necessarily the reality. And also, they may be a little bit of a trickster themselves. You know, they might not always, you know, their feelings are leading them. And you know, when the cold light of day comes around and there's the logic of what's going on, sometimes you realize that your feelings have actually led you astray. So anyway, I hope that was helpful. All of these readings were coming from just looking at this 5th house, and where the ruler for the 5th house is, its relationship to Venus, and then its subsequent aspects, and then also having a look at what's in the 5th house. So, you know, when you're looking at a house, even if you've got nothing in it, you can still find the content from the ruler of that house. So anyway, I hope that was helpful to you. Sending you lots of love wherever you are in your journey, and hopefully I'll catch up with you another time. So take care and speak to you all soon. Bye for now.